I never even knew his real name, and he was probably a good 10 years older than me at least. I was but a child in my eyes at the lost, confused, and still very impressionable age of 18. It wasn't like me to talk to strangers so easily and openly, but then it wasn't like me to leave my diary lying around open for all to see either. Once I decided to start journaling publicly online at Open Diary, I chose to start talking openly to strangers. So I suppose I shouldn't have been so surprised when one began talking back. But he understood me. He offered advice if he had some to offer. He shared his own experiences in the matter whenever they were relevant. Even when he had nothing to say, he still made it known that he was there, taking in every word I wrote. Sometimes it was with an emoticon, though we didn't yet have a name for them back then. Other times he simply responded with an ellipsis. ... Those three little dots were frequently overused in my entries, acting simultaneously sans distinguishment from one another as a symbol of trailing thought, confused feelings, or words left unsaid. But it never mattered how I used those dots. He always understood me. I remember the rush of emotions I felt the first time I logged into my diary to find he had left a comment for me. My immediate presumption was that one of my friends had read my entry. I slipped up when I told them I had started an open diary. Now they'd found it and I was toast. My chest tightened with anxiety merely thinking about the potential confrontations to come now that they were aware of my true feelings. I slapped the mouse, feverishly clicking around the page, tapping my finger impatiently while waiting the 7 to 10 agonizing seconds between the clicks for the pages to load. My defensive arguments had already begun constructing themselves in my head as my latest entry finally loaded on the screen, and ready to defend myself, I hastily scrolled down the page to read the comment. Once I realized the words hadn't come from somebody I knew, the heavy thumping in my chest started to dull. My shaken, recovering heart instead began to swell as I processed the positive sentiment written at the bottom of my page. At first, I sat unsure about whether or not I should reply. Every public service announcement and adult-given lecture about stranger danger was playing on the screen in the back of my mind. But then again, what was the point of posting anything on this thing they called the internet if I didn't want strangers to see it? Besides, a stranger is merely a person you haven't met yet, and I was supposed to be an adult now. Society expected me to go out and start shaking people's hands to make a name for myself in this world. My parents and teachers couldn't be responsible for broadening my horizon my entire life. At some point I had to take control. And replying to a stranger's comment on my open diary seemed as good a place to start as any, I decided. A week later, I would barely remember why I was even hesitant to reply in the first place. He and I exchanged words as easily as old friends, reminiscing about the good old days, wondering about the future, and gifting encouragement to one another when facing trials. Our exchanges went on for months. As time passed, I grew to expect his comments on every entry I wrote. There were some nights when I logged in having nothing I wanted to say, but I wrote about some mundane scene from my day anyway, simply to reignite our interaction once more. I would read his stories about cats doing ordinary cat activities and laugh, then share the stories of my cats doing the same. He would read my whining over boys and questions about the meaning of life, then share words of comfort. A favorite of mine was his tale of the aha moment he had, explaining how he engaged the passenger side seatbelt when placing his backpack on the seat before driving. This worked to prevent the obnoxious dinging of the warning indicator, mistaking the weight of his bag for that of a person sitting in the seat. I had thought this maneuver genius, as I had the very same issue of triggering the seatbelt indicator only weeks prior, but instead opted to hurl my heavy bag into the back seat as I pulled out of the parking lot, breaking 3 of the 4 pencils I had stuffed into the front pocket in the process. I shared this story with him and he laughed, replying he had thought about doing the same. He also mentioned his pencils were mechanical and likely wouldn't have broken, however. We continued to chat through comments on our diaries my entire freshman year of college. Then, one summer evening, I opened my diary and found no new comment on my latest entry. I clicked over onto his page to see that he also hadn't posted anything new that day. The next night, the same story. The night after that, still nothing. I told myself that he must be busy. His absence wasn't a big deal, and I shouldn't worry about it. A week later, I logged in to see he had left an ellipsis in my comment section. A wave of relief rushed over me, and I sat comforted knowing he was still around. Still, I kicked myself for being so childish and thinking his failure to comment for a couple days meant we weren't friends anymore. People have lives. Things happen. And this was all a part of grown-up relationships. I clicked over to his page, but he still hadn't posted any new entries. I didn't have too much to say, so I logged off without posting anything either. As the summer continued, I posted less frequently. So did he. For the most part, we continued to leave comments and encouragement on each other's pages, even if we didn't have too much to say. Both our lives became a bit overwhelming. He wrote a post about starting a new job and how he barely had the energy to take care of his cats when he got home, let alone to write about them. I wrote about starting a new term at college and my promotion to full-time management at my job, and how my workload was simply too tremendous to worry about analyzing my life each night. His 2 weekly posts throughout autumn became bi-weekly posts in the winter. Come March, he only posted once the entire month. By then, my posts were rather sporadic too. By the time summer rolled around again, I practically forgot I even had an online diary. And it didn't take too long before my login credentials erased themselves from my brain space altogether. Eventually, as life progressed, I would be locked out from accessing my own recorded memories and all those conversations now floating somewhere out in cyberspace. These days, I no longer remember most of what we said. I don't even remember what his first comment actually was. But I remember him. From time to time. I remember him. And I wonder, maybe he remembers me too. Maybe he remembers what his first comment to me was. Maybe he hasn't thought of me since. Maybe he had an epiphany moment to shake him free of the need to maintain online friendships with teenagers. Maybe he logged in hoping to find a comment from me, but now I was the one who had disappeared. Maybe he forgot his password and lost access to all his memories too. Maybe he's still out in California. Maybe he knows my brother. Maybe he still has a house full of cats. Maybe he got married. Maybe he died. Maybe he was a ghost in the machine. Maybe he was an angel. Maybe he and I will meet again. But probably not. Virtual friendship is virtually friendship. After all, I never even knew his real name.